Everybody, wait a minute. Everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute.
Show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh man, let me get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh my goodness, I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh my goodness, what's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking on 3 of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh my goodness, behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't gotta look, it's falling. Oh my goodness, this guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media gear. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
I mix what I like.
Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Welcome, come on in. As the ear doctor also says, tell a friend that it's on again. Invite others to get some of this boom bap breakfast with you. Before we move on, I gotta go back to where I was. It's a couple seconds. I need folks. While we wait for folks to get in here, we have a great show. Dedrick Muhammad is going to be here later. We're going to go through some comments and criticisms and some other things. In the meanwhile, I'll have some fun. But let me just bring that back because it's survived. I think it survived the stream. I don't know if y'all.
Keep it right there.
Everybody, wait a minute. So I just want everybody to understand that this little groove right here is something I put together. This is an I Mix What I Like exclusive. And it was an attempt some years ago. It blends. Everybody, wait a minute. That's Vibe Band. Shout out to Vibe, V-E-Y-B-E. If you are not familiar with them and want to get an introduction to Grown Folks Go-Go, that original socket pocket. I saw them on my 50th. That's who I went to see for my 50th. And then I mixed it with one of sort of a household favorite. That's Mark Anthony in an adjusted way, so I think it's going to get through the copyright. That's it, Tay. And what I was trying to do a few years ago, because I quietly know, indirectly know people in the go-go community, in the rap world, just indirectly on low levels. And I was like, let me put this together, because I wanted to encourage people to do this as a black and brown anthem, politicized as a response to police violence, which is oddly going to be a segue here. And I just had this picture when I just had this I still do this fantasy of all these people in this. So what he's saying, and what the song Mark Anthony is singing, Vivir Mi Vida, is he's saying, I'm gonna live my life. And it was funny because apparently he wrote this song in response to J-Lo, to Jennifer Lopez breaking his heart, and he leaving him. So he created this song which became this huge hit in the salsa world. And Mark Anthony, I didn't know this most of my life. I only know him as the little dude who showed up in Denzel's what was that movie he did where he had to save the little white girl? And Mark Anthony is the father and he's the villain. Anyway, I thought he did a good job. I also thought Mark Anthony did a great job with Jennifer Lopez when they were still together in Word. He also did a good job playing Hector Lavoe in El Cantante. think I'm saying that wrong, and I should know better because that's one of my favorite. I'm just excited right now. Let me get the name right. Cantante, yeah, El Cantante, the singer, and which is a great movie actually. And Hector Lavoe was a phenomenal singer, and that song El Cantante is incredible too. And anyway, so he creates this. So Mark Anthony creates this track, and he's singing it like you wrecked my life, but I'm gonna in the part I looped right here, Voyage de I'm gonna laugh, I'm gonna dance, I'm gonna live my life. And he plays that like it's a huge anthem and all of his, and the video is hot, and it's like you broke my heart, but I'm gonna shine. So I wanted to politicize this by saying let's hook this with go-go, and I could listen to this all day. Even this little loop I created, I will listen to it endlessly. And if you have it with headphones on, you can really hear how I got the bass drops perfectly. It's so dope. You can hear the bass line in it. And anyway, and I was like trying to create this like politicized. I wanted in my head this politicized, unified anthem of like we out here anyway. You gonna abuse us, you gonna oppress us, but we still, we gonna laugh, we gonna dance, we gonna organize, we gonna get some, get back and all that kind of stuff too. But sunshine, everybody, wait a minute. Anyway, so I love this joint, and I'm glad. And so far, I think it's surviving the censors. So yeah, I can make it available. I don't mind. I was trying because what I wanted to do was, and I left it with the cowbell part in there too, because I wanted my brother-in-law to get on this track. I wanted Rebel Diaz to get on this track. I wanted Vibe Band to get on this track. Like I was like, because it turns out the keyboardist for Vibe Band is in my man's church. So it's like, anyway, I might come back to it. But anyway, so that's how I wanted to start the show this morning. I'll stop it there. Shout out to everybody. But that joint, anyway, great way to start the day. A little bit of Pocket and that anthem. La Voz. That's it. Mark Anthony, that little tiny dude, but he can sing, man. He can sing. And
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Oh, wow. You hear that? My phone is listening to me. That's deep. I'm not even talking to you. Anyway, hope everybody had as good a weekend as could be expected. Hope you have a great week this week. A lot coming up. As I said, we're going to get into the National Bureau of Economic Research, which I had done a little bit earlier, a couple weeks ago when it came out. But now that we got Dedrick Asante-Muhammad coming in at 9 o'clock to really go over the report and get into it, I look forward to that. But I guess I'll start that way because, as I was saying, I wanted that song to be an anthem, like in my little, in my fantasy of what that track would become, would be like this black and brown anthem, this salsa go-go unified, we're gonna, you're gonna keep doing what you do, but we're gonna be out here. And then sure enough, what, let me pull this up here. It's unfortunately still relevant. So saw this tweet from Black Lives Matter DC, which again, please check our previous interviews with April Goggins and the BLM-10. Maybe I'll put that in the show notes. I'll put that in the description to this video. Just so people are clear, if you're not, the Black Lives Matter DC crew and many others in the BLM-10 and beyond should not be confused with the BLM Foundation leadership. These are very separate entities, and with so just to be clear on that, and then you can check out those videos for more of their own commentary on the differences there. So just want to be clear on that. But all about, as it says here, DC Police Department murderer Commander Jason Bagshaw. Hashtag fire Bagshaw. MPD Commander Jason, Metropolitan Police Department Commander Jason Bagshaw murdered a black man last night. And you know what? I'm going to take that misspelling as in the picture here as Kwame Ture said. What do we need to spell your language? Anybody can speak and spell this simple honky's language. It's revolutionary activity. It's a revolutionary response. I don't need to spell the title of your murdering cops correctly, because as it says here, we can, where it is clear enough, he is already notorious for supervising and participating in MPD's brutalization of activists and organizers on Black Lives Matter Plaza during the 2020 uprisings. Jason Bagshaw is a lieutenant in MPD's Special Ops Division. He is known for singling out protesters and having them arrested, including the father and family of Karan Hilton, who was recently murdered by an MPD officer. Sutton. Bagshaw has consistently abused his power. Here's him picking up and throwing a street medic during the 2020 uprising. You cannot reform this. Here he shoves and holds a woman while another cop winds up to hit her. So I'm gonna scroll down. So if you need to not see this, just because I haven't actually reviewed all of this very closely enough, but a lot of Chuck Modi tweets in here from 2020, where you would see on, just turn away if you need to, election night from November 3rd, 2020. You just see him doing his thing here. Okay, so just anyway, I just retweeted this earlier today, and just encourage people to support Black Lives Matter DC, and to stay up to date with these efforts, informing us of the latest of the police doing what it is that they do. Definitely thank you for the super chat, McYagermeister. Speaking of pigs, Richmond VA police lied about a July 4th mass shooting plot, and no one is talking about it because the people really arrested were allegedly without U.S. documentation. Hey, I'm not aware of this. Definitely please send links to mediablackpower@gmail.com or tag us at Black Power Media 1, as you see scrolling beneath me. But appreciate you with that update as well. Yeah, that's crazy. Anyway, so definitely we'll stay as much as possible on top of that. So a couple other things real quick, and I've pulled up some comments and criticism of me in this show, and a couple kind words too, but mostly some criticism that I'm going to get to in a little bit. Yeah, wow, 400, wow. Anyway, but just real quick, I saw the new series over the weekend it looks like it's put together by Nas. I didn't get a chance to really get into the details behind the scenes, but the Supreme Team documentary about Supreme and Prince, the legendary Queens, you know, drug selling crew, the Supreme Team. And it was fascinating because I've been hearing about them, you know, most of my adult life, as they talk about a lot of rap references going back decades. They were huge. They're my age exactly. Literally, Prince is still locked up. It just turned 50. He and Preem have done roughly 30 plus years at this point. So it's another one of those cautionary tales, as they say. But there were a couple of things that I thought were interesting, just in the presentation of it, which is, again, I would love, I really would, maybe Kalanji can help us with this. I would love one day, even just off the record, to be able to sit down with somebody like Nas and be like, man, you know, you exhibit so much, obviously, talent and knowledge, but there are like the limitations on the political, on the politics are pretty clear, and it's unfortunate. So, for instance, why, like he did with his Illmatic documentary, why the centrality of figures like, in that documentary, Henry Louis Gates and Yale as the epitome of having reached and overcome the origins of his beginnings, or his beginning. Like, why is that? And in this one, why is Mayor Eric Adams again portrayed as this, literally saying by the end of the series, with this whole story of I was a small time criminal, and look at me now, I'm mayor of the biggest city in the biggest country in the world. Young hustlers should look at my example. And thematically, it works well with a lot of what I feel like I'm trying to do in these media streets, which is throw up a critique of Black capitalism, of Black neoliberal responses to horrific conditions, and so on. And yet these are the kinds of overt presentations of those politics as legit, against which we have to struggle. Because you have someone with the authority of a Nas. He's interviewing LL. He's interviewing Preem and Prince. He's from prison. He's Nas. And I don't know what it is, obviously it's generational in terms of the impact. I don't think he means as much to the young folks as he does to folks of my generation. But when Nas says something in a certain, it has a certain, power to it. So it's, and here he comes again. I came out of the hood. It was horrible. We struggled. I mean, the story white folks love to hear, that whole thing of for some reason, the only in America is only connected to the success part, and not the part, of the few, the success of the few, but not to the part of the creation of the conditions for the many. So it's like that America gets the credit for having allowed a Nas out, but it doesn't get the blame for putting Nas in the first place, and everybody else who's still left in those conditions. So that was it was just like with Mayor Adams saying, like you don't have to, and then presenting himself like I was, headed in that direction too, like, trying to give us his street credibility as a youngster and this and that. And then saying, but you could go a different way. Okay, sure. One of you can become mayor one at a time, because you can only have one mayor at a time. And can do all of the neoliberal, institutional, state supporting, political, capitalist supporting, you can do all of that too, which of course creates the conditions that everybody is stuck in. So and then there was another part that really stuck out to me too, where I was drawn out of because I do like the stories. I'm caught, and I get why these are so appealing. I'm guilty of the same. Like, I like those stories. Like, anyway, everybody likes those stories. And then learning about people that we've heard about all of our lives. I get all of that. But what so seeing Eric Adams threw me out of that immediately. Another part that threw me out is that when they interviewed a dude that was known at one point as the hip hop cop. And again, I didn't really prepare much for this morning, so I don't have it all in front of me. But the dude that, if you go back to the classic documentary, to me, what is it? Black and Blue, the history of the hip hop cop, something like that. And it was about the rap intelligence program. And this dude, this no disrespect, I'm not, but this heavy set dude, who was the hip hop cop, who was part of the undercover unit that spied on and I think set up and took advantage of rappers and their celebrity and of course some of their own foolishness, but put them under surveillance. Like, he's doing all of that. And in that documentary, you see him interviewed by the activist King Downing, right? That's his name, right? A tall, light-skinned brother who I think was in the Panthers at one point. But you see him interviewing the hip-hop cop in a critical way, basically, like, you're part of the problem type thing. But he shows up in this documentary with no real reference to that. I think they put in like his lower third, like that they say something about the rap, hip hop, something like that, but it's not mentioned. It's not like, and he's just interviewed as somebody who would have been running around chasing the Supreme team. And I'm sitting there saying, damn, why is this guy getting to come back? Almost sort of like redeemed and being this authority figure without Nas or anybody in this film explaining who this guy was. A lot of people will not have seen him in the documentary I'm talking about. And I'm like, that was irritating. And then the last one that was really, I literally had to stand up and walk around my little room here when I saw it, was when somebody who I don't know named Andrew Sekou Jackson comes on as a sort of, academic intellect, activist pundit at the end. And he says, and his commentary is at the end of the series, something to the effect that he did that same anti-historical juxtaposition of Dr. King and Malcolm X. It is so cliche and it is so factually incorrect. It is now, to me, annoying. Dr. King saw us as having a dream, and Malcolm X saw us as having a nightmare, and they and it's one or the other. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting there saying, okay, again, if anybody would do these historical figures and human beings the honor, and this to a lesser extent is going to come back up in the criticism of my own criticism here, in a little criticism of me in a little bit. Not that I'm on that level, but just this point of, if you would do them the honor of reading their work or listening to what they actually said, instead of referring to cliche, that would be really appreciated. I'm sure they would greatly appreciate it. So again, when King talks about his dream becoming a nightmare under the capitalism and white supremacy and militarism of this country, when Malcolm's analysis led him to want to make more radical and militant the elements of King's civil rights struggle. Again, not that he was softening, but that he was radicalizing the movement, and King was radicalizing in that direction. Like, all of that is just left out of these cliches. And of course, the fact that both of them were addressed in the exact same way by the state. So that part really, I was like, man, please, we got to stop doing that. So that would be my, like Nas. There are others you could point to, and there are other that that you could in to strengthen the analysis and the approach to these histories that would be really helpful. And stop with the cliches that inhibit analysis. Like that's something. And the guy, this Andrew Sekou Jackson looked like he's at least my age. So what I'm like, these are cliches that get fed to us at an early age, and then we don't, if we don't get them challenged, they get regurgitated and repeated. And even as we become elders, we don't advance that. So some kid is going to watch this and be like, yeah, that's that Malcolm King thing, and that's going to be the extent of it. And that's just so irritating. So anyway, those are the three for those things. One other thing, speaking of that history, I got a call over the weekend from I'm just going to say, I got a call from somebody who I don't want to say the name yet, because I don't know what is being developed but I got a call from someone from my grad school days who continues to meant a lot, an elder at this point, with an update of what folks might remember was shared briefly by Dr. Carol Boyce Davies in her recent visits to this platform about the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell, and more broadly, the state of Black studies. And it's not good. It's worse than I thought. And the autonomy, the sovereignty of the Africana Center, I understood was lost, but the damage, the effect of that, which I should have seen as predictable, was not really known to me. And when I hear that they only had one undergrad major last year. When I was in the Africana Studies and Research Center as a grad student, we would have not only the cohort of roughly 8 to 10 grad students per year for each year. So we would have, 15 to 20 grad students at all times, from both in their first or second years of the 2-year program. And then we would have what felt like an infinite amount of undergraduate students, most of them coming from the small but relatively strong Black community of students there at Cornell, who would take these courses and major in Africana or African American or whatever they were calling it studies. And to hear that they only have one, and that the building itself, in which there is the Dr. John Henry Clark Library, no longer houses classes exclusive to Africana Studies, and now that it's caught up within the College of Liberal Arts, you have all these classes taking place there, like it's like any other building now. Yo, it's slow motion, like colonialism has a long, not only memory but view of the future. And from their perspective, I think they were saying, look, okay, we lost a little battle in the late 60s, early 70s. You brought in Dr. Turner. He held on for a couple of decades, didn't do everything perfectly correct. Even Dr. Carol Boyce Davies offered some constructive, loving criticism. But we'll just wait it out. Even if it's 50, 60-year project, we'll just wait it out, and we'll gut it, and we'll get rid of it, and make sure that, to the extent that they produced a handful of people who think in this direction, we'll block that out going forward. So it was a horrific, really depressing call to take. It's anyway. So just to connect the threads real quick, part of what I thought of was, how great would it have been for Nas to incorporate some of the, maybe mine or the generation behind me, Black studies scholars who are right there in New York, some of them doing really good work, who could have used the boost, who could have reminded of a certain tradition, who could have, added a little something to his work. But again, everybody's thinking about, I want HBO, I want distribution, I want some money, I want this, I want that, and it doesn't, Thank you, Lives, for the super chat. Appreciate you. Yeah. No, I hear you. I think I think more of like, when I think back, what was his name? Who started Peanut from the Bears, who got credit for the punch of creating the fumbles in the NFL. We didn't drop the ball, but it was punched out while we were running with it. And I think some of us started, celebrating before we got to the end zone. It's like Dr. King said himself, exactly his own quote, or I'll paraphrase it, but he said the civil rights legislation that he won, he said, was like rushing the football to the 50-yard line, putting it down and claiming touchdown. And I think part of it was people, like the Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, the Henry Louis Gateses, wanted to put the ball down at the 50-yard line because they were like, I got it to the 50-yard. That's good enough for me. We don't need a full touchdown. We don't need a full victory. My program got cut. The Africana, if you're talking about the Africana Studies and Research Center, it's still there in name, but it's not the amount of students being recruited to it has been dropped as more have been recruited into, just more broadly speaking, liberal arts, which is where Africana is now housed there. So, all right, let's before we get got about 30 minutes before Dedrick gets here. Let me pull up some of these criticisms that I went through. I went through some of the comments. I tried to actually look through some of the comments on YouTube and elsewhere. And so I thought, since we had a couple of minutes this morning, I would just go through them. Let me move this so we can see the whole thing. So here's the first one. Dr. Jared, how are you doing? Well, I hope. Dr. Jared, I really need to understand, how do you expect Black America to close the wealth gap if they don't participate in this evil capitalist society? Now, I agree with you when you said we should organize and get political power, but we both know that won't happen in our lifetime. Stolen Africans are just trying to survive and live well while oppressed, I'm assuming. I get it. But first of all, just in terms of the way that I have not actually advocated, I don't remember ever saying, or certainly writing, that I expect America to close the wealth gap, full stop, unless, that full stop. So I don't, and as we're going to talk with Dedrick about, and I like the way his argument is, we shouldn't even call it a racial wealth gap, because it suggests, when you say gap, that it can be closed. It's a divide, and it's a divide because it is, as I'm paraphrasing and interpreting, it is necessary. You, again, cannot have rich without poor. If your desire is to be in the 1%, by definition, you have to help create and recreate in perpetuity the 99%. So I'm not advocating this idea that the wealth gap can be closed. And as the report, as I mentioned when we covered it a few weeks ago, we're going to, and as we look at it in greater detail in the next hour, Even this new report from the National Bureau of Economic Research confirms what many of us have been advocating in different ways for a very long time, that the gap cannot close and will not close. And as they argue, even if you remove all of the barrier variables to Black development since the end of the Civil War, if you take away magically all of the white supremacy, all of the barriers to entry from the uneven beginnings coming out of enslavement, if you take away all of that, the best they say we can hope for is a 3-to-1 wealth ratio between white and Black. It's currently, I think we'll look at it, I think it's 6-to-1 now, and that's as best we could hope for, and that even sounds low, but the 3-to-1. So in other words, there is no closing. As long as capitalism exists, there is no closing these gaps. By the way, I think it's a mistake when we ignore the fact that there are class divisions within a white society, that even in a white supremacist country, European settlers, colonial settler country, even whites aren't as a collective equal. So this idea, so I'm not advocating that. And I get it. And I also, of course, get it that participation in capitalism is a way for oppressed people to just survive. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what I've argued that is leading to this here, but so what I'm simply saying is that that stolen Africans have as our only recourse political organization, movements, and that will assume political power. And then I just leave it at that. How we define political power is another set of questions. I am not advocating by assuming political power that we just engage the Democrat and Republican parties as they exist. I'm not advocating any of that. I'm just saying, and I'm intentionally being vague here because I don't want to claim to have all the answers, and a lot of the answers can't come in these public spaces. But the assumption of political power should be the goal. So that's it. And participating in an evil capitalist society, as you write here, can only at best lead us to where we are now, with wild inequality and a handful of people doing okay. So that's, anyway. D. Stevenson 100 was hating hard on the channel recently. So I pulled up a couple of their comments here. So this was, I believe, in the criticism of Boyce Watkins and Claude Anderson. Jared, do you want Black people's poor? And they also wrote, we know the situation we in, but can we call ourselves a Black revolutionary without busting guns? Hell no, we just talking. I worked with homeless people. Ask Jared if he want to be homeless. You let Jared fool you. He's a college professor. He's not hurt for money. So let's just, so as I wrote here in my responses, sometimes I do respond. Is that what you get from all the paying close attention to my work and broadcasts? Watch a few more, read my books, and come back in with a detailed review of explaining your conclusions. Or better question for you, D, is do you want Black people to be fleeced and ignorant? So this idea that somehow if I'm critical of Black capitalism, it sounds like a little bit similar to the more polite comment or question from the previous person, is that somehow if you're critical of Black capitalism and capitalism, you want Black people to be poor. No, in fact, I'm so desperate to not have Black people be poor that I want poverty and the condition of being poor to be impossible. That's what I'm advocating. It could be, particularly in a society that produces as much as this. And in fact, in a world now that produces as much as it does, there should be zero poverty and poor anywhere. That's what I'm advocating, actually. So what what defenders of Black capitalists ultimately are doing is defending the poverty that most Black people suffer. So then this whole thing of relatively anonymous people saying we need to bust guns, otherwise we're just talking. Yeah, I'm very clear. I'm not advocating that. And I am just talking. It's a YouTube channel. Or as you refer to in my quote unquote day job, I'm talking to students in a classroom. We're not in a political organization. I say the same thing to them when they get frustrated with my analysis or the work we're doing, and they say, well, what do you want us to do? I don't know. Join a political organization and I'll see you out there. But in here, we're in a classroom. The answers to that can't come in a classroom. We have, as I say all the time, I love it. We have the luxury of being faculty and students in a class and having the chance to step out, step aside, take a break from all the abuse and relatively objectively analyze the situation and talk about it, study it and talk about it. That's exactly. So yeah, you're absolutely right that I'm not going to be on YouTube or in a classroom advocating that we bust guns. And of course, there's no detail in the comment. So, at whom are these guns being busted? And to what end? I see no reference to Che or George Jackson in the comments, so I don't know what you're actually talking about. And usually when people start talking randomly and publicly about busting guns, they're the cops. That's usually what I think. But I don't know. D. Stevenson says, I worked with homeless people. Ask Jared if he wants to be homeless. Well, D. Stevenson, I don't know how much you pay attention to my show, but as I've talked about, at least briefly at one point in my late teens, I was homeless. So you worked with the homeless. I was homeless. So I've experienced it. I know it's nothing sweet. Don't want no parts of it. And I don't want anybody to have to suffer. So I don't know. And yeah, relatively speaking, as a professor, I'm not hurt for money. And as I've said, I'm not even the primary breadwinner in the house. So relatively speaking, you're right. Me and mine are not hurt for money. But that's sort of the point. I could turn around and use that position and say, see, I've made it. What's wrong with you? Or I could say, I've made it because there are cracks and crevices that I've been able to sort of squeeze through and work through that don't exist for everybody else. And I want those to not be necessary. Just as I keep saying, I don't want to have to be an elite business person to succeed or live well. I don't think anybody should have to be a competent intellectual to get a job in an academic setting to survive. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying we all are contributing to the wealth. We should all benefit from it. So I've never said I've never, again, relatively speaking, I'm not hurt for money. And more importantly, I'm fully health insured. I have full health insurance. So, yeah, but I'm not the standard. Otherwise I'd be like, yeah, everything is great. What's the problem in the world? You might even hear the birds chirping outside my windows. You don't have birds chirping outside your window? You don't have time to do a YouTube show in the morning? You didn't marry a woman who makes more money than you? What's wrong with you? So anyway, appreciate you sort of watching. Kamani Jefferson says, why isn't, and thank you, I'm glad I found this because I wanted to give Kamani his due credit here. Why isn't political literacy a term? Crazy how and forgive me if I said his because I think I know who Kamani is. So if I'm remembering correctly, I know Kamani to be a man. If I'm incorrect and I'm identifying and remembering incorrectly who I think Kamani is versus this Kamani, I apologize. So anyway, Kamani Jefferson says, why isn't political literacy a term? Crazy how none of these guys study in detail agencies and their true power like they study finances. This is again in response to, I believe it was Du Bois and Claude Anderson. It might have been the Earn Your Leisure one. I would argue they don't really study finances properly either. But I love the point about political literacy. We need political literacy, not financial literacy. So usually we refer to that as political education. In the activist world that I come out of, But I think given the popularity of financial literacy, I want to give Kamani credit and say that we need to abandon financial literacy and get to political literacy. Carl Davis asked a couple days ago, please explain buying power. My understanding is that we don't have wealth and we live paycheck to paycheck. I get that our economy is consumption based, but won't all Americans have buying power? And with our incomes being the lowest, wouldn't we have the least buying power? Great show, keep teaching. Thank you, Carl. And essentially, I don't want to undermine the value of my own work here, but essentially, Carl, you have it correct. Everything you've said here is largely correct. And again, this is sort of my point. My work around buying power is not really a work about economics. It's a work about media and narrative and myth making and propaganda. Because the finances are relatively easy. The economics of it are relatively easy once you peel away all of the horrific journalism, mythology, propaganda, et cetera, and so forth that keep promoting it. But essentially, you're right. Black people don't have any wealth, and it's headed to zero by 2053. Most do live paycheck to paycheck. And given that we do make the least in the economy, our buying power is least. And as I've shown in my work, even all the claims about the strength of Black buying power, even it is only at most, as I showed, 1/8 of the strength of buying power of whites. Buying power is an advertising or marketing concept used primarily only to assess any group's ability to spend money on what advertisers are selling. So Black people, brown people, every segment within these communities, white people, municipalities, businesses, all have their buying power assessed. Only when it's propagandized towards Black people does it become some sort of revolutionary call and a solution to the problems. But nowhere else is that the case. So we do have the least buying power. It's just that buying power when it comes to Black people is rebranded as revolutionary potential. And that's the false claim. And that's why just the other day, the Earn Your Leisure cats with almost 1 million subscribers and millions of dollars in revenue and all this, all this attention and whatever that they get, they're sitting there just a couple of days ago. Well, the video's from a couple months old now, but they're saying, how is our buying power going up if our wealth is going down? And then mispronouncing the Selig Center that produces this monstrosity of a myth every year as their sole source. So they don't understand it. Most people don't understand this. And because of the propaganda. It's not an issue of economics, although I don't think that they understand the economics either. So I hope that helps with that. But thank you for watching. This was a comment definitely in response to the Boyce Watkins and Claude Anderson criticism, saying to me that you are way off base in attempting to analyze what these brothers have begun and how they are evolving. What a masterful job of nitpicking from across the street rather than take your behind across the street, watch their show, attend the events, then interview them and present your findings. So again, I appreciate that there's a comment and I encourage people to comment, but I don't appreciate that it seems like you're not watching the video, you're not paying attention, because in that video, in each video, I've made very clear that at least 2 points. One, if you or anyone are making public analysis and commentary, it's up to be criticized. I don't owe you. It shouldn't be on me to track you down or to show up at your event, which I probably can't afford to attend anyway, since they're usually selling access. But it's not my responsibility to find you and ask you to present my findings to you. That's not my job. They went on YouTube, they went on Zoom, they give these paid for classes and all of this and fleece their own audiences by charging for these horrible analyses. And then you're telling me I'm out of order by nitpicking their horrible analysis and their incorrect findings and conclusions, which is, professionally speaking, part of my expertise. Politically speaking, definitely in my wheelhouse and in set of interests. So I've never appreciated this approach. Then, of course, if you paid attention and listened, you would also know that I have reached out and been willing to at least with Boyce Watkins to debate him. I had reached out, albeit some years ago at this point, to Claude Anderson and was told he wouldn't come on my show. So I don't owe, so not only initially do I not owe either of them even that much, but to your point, I have, and they don't. Then lastly, I've produced work on the subject that has been freely available. The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power has been freely available in digital download since the summer, I believe, of 2020. We're going on 2 years of free access to the work. Never mind the decades long of commentary, journalism, and presentations on the subject that I know for a fact Boyce Watkins has been introduced to, and that I have good, I'm pretty confident that Claude Anderson has been made aware of as well. They also then choose to ignore me, to not engage me, and to not even publicly offer up a criticism of my work, which is up for public criticism. So the same thing to GVL. Did you reach out to me, come to my presentations, and present your findings of criticism? Why am I not owed the same thing? Although I do appreciate you acknowledging the masterful job I did of nitpicking. So anyway, these are nonsensical straw arguments about, you should reach out to them instead of being publicly critical. What the hell? That's nonsense. That's ridiculous. Nobody owes you that. If you make a public analysis, it's open for criticism. I'm not name calling. I'm not beefing with them. I'm criticizing their horrible analysis. And it is horrible. And it's wrong, demonstrably wrong. Anyway. Let's see. Oh, this is a Earn Your Leisure troll right here. They came through with a lot of comments, but they raised points that I think are prevalent in response to me and work that tries to do what I'm trying to do. So they say here, the name I think is Correcting Irresponsible Financial something. So they're correct. But correcting says someone who is anti-capitalist will always destroy anything positive. The point is, teach us how to build generational wealth, not put down and belittle Black wealth or Black waste. Stop saying no and present positive, constructive policies and formulas to build Black America. Criticism of Earn Your Leisure was just plain silly. I don't know why you think it's silly. In fact, what I'm saying is there is no way to build generational wealth, and people who sell you that mythology, who literally sell you that mythology, are at minimum just wrong. At maximum, they're willfully lying and hustling you. So my positive constructive policies, I don't know if you pay attention, include redistributing the gross domestic product of the country, the $20+ trillion created in this country every year by everything all of us all do in our economic activity. The wealth is already there. Let's redistribute it. There's that one big policy that I advocate in my book and in everywhere else. So I'm not belittling Black wealth. I'm simply pointing to the data that says by 2053, it will not exist at all. Same thing. This person went to another video. I'm glad I got the picture there. An older video, clearly did not watch it, and is just posting randomly. Why is it these so-called Black revolutionary pundits believe that this government actually counts or recognizes the vote? Wake up. I never said that. But I love how if the government is so corrupt that it will not let you vote and legitimately vote, but it's not so corrupt as in other words, it won't prevent you from building your black capitalist fantasies. It will only stop you from voting. But you can go out there and make all the money and get all the power you want without their intervention. But I need to wake up. These are genius. But I love the trolling of just going through the videos and not, like, there's no reference to anything I actually said. There's no timestamp saying you said this and this is where I'm saying you're wrong and here's a link and here's my data and here's my research. No, it's just wake up. And I think this is the same person, but it's a similar comment. And it comes again also, all these criticisms I've been getting lately come from my criticisms of Claude Anderson and Boyce Watkins. It starts by saying you were correct in your comments, and I should just stop it right there. And you should have, whoever wrote this, my screenshot didn't catch it, but whoever wrote this, you should have just stopped right there. You are correct in your comments. Thank you. I appreciate that. But why is it that you are, this is Marcus Poole. This is a person called Marcus Poole who commented on my critique of Boyce and Claude Anderson, and then went to my website and posted the same comment there as well. So they were thirsty for this response. So here it is, Marcus. But why is it that you are so afraid to criticize bell hooks who wrote books denigrating Black revolutionaries, basically accusing those involved with Black power as being serial misogynists and saying that the implication of Black power stopped Black progress because of implied violence? At the same time, she clearly expresses that with one or two exceptions, the only masculinity she respects are those demonstrated by a few gay guys. I seriously want to know, why is it that you and others seem to be so terrified of criticizing this woman's work? So my response on my website was something to the effect of, why, Marcus, are you so afraid to have Black capitalist men be criticized for their horrible analysis? What does what bell hooks wrote when she was alive and said when she was alive no longer being so? How is any of that relevant to a critique of these men who are out here prominently charging Black audiences for the sale of Black capitalist fantasy? What does bell hooks's flaws have to do with that? And why, Marcus, are you so afraid that these still living men, still producing work and ideas, why is it so terrifying for you to have them be criticized? Talk to me, Marcus. Anyway, so I don't know. I'm not afraid to criticize bell hooks. I just don't think it is necessary at this point because she's not here anymore. And that line of work that you're saying she was engaged in isn't of my focus. And she's not currently producing mythologies about Black capitalism, which is what I'm focused on right now. So if you pay attention to the videos that you're criticizing, you would hear me say in most of them that a lot of the work I'm coming to now that I'm being critical of, I'm coming to through my focus on this cryptoganda essay that I'm struggling still to finish, and the second edition of my myth and propaganda of Black buying power book, which I have to finish by the end of this year. So because of my focus there, and Marcus, did you get the first book? Did you read the first one? My focus there brings me to all this. So I'm not going to be seeing the older analyses of bell hooks, who is no longer living and producing that work. I'm not going to see that I'm not likely to see that or be confronted with it as I am now by the living men who are producing and charging Black people. At least bell hooks charged major universities for her work. You may not like it, but she was not charging poor Black people with the promise that they will get rich if they read her work or attended her classes. And she's dead. So that's why. So maybe that's another reason. So, but the real question is, why are you so afraid to have these men be criticized? What is it about that terrifies you so? Anyway, so that's that. That's just some of the. Those are just some of the criticisms that I had that I saw. That's exactly what I was. Comrade P. That's exactly what I was. That's exactly what I was starting to think. Marcus. What are you so afraid of, Marcus? I was also thinking of Silence of the Lambs. Like, Marcus, what happens when you hear black men being criticized for their whack analysis? Do the lambs start crying, Marcus? Oh man, but I hear you. But I'm real. But on you. But on that, Marcus, and on that general line of illogic, I'm very much like Eddie Murphy in Boomerang. Can it get just a little bit darker? Can you turn off all the lights and just a little bit darker? No, Powernomics is not superb. I encourage you to revisit that. I disagree. It's not superb, and the lack of sources in it don't help. But there's a lot of mistakes in that book, most of which you hear recounted in these videos I've been critical of with Claude and Claude Anderson and Boyce Watkins. So yeah, we got to have our footnotes and our citations, and then we got to have a non-black capitalist analysis. That's it. Yeah, I don't know what the bell hooks got. I mean, I don't even know where that came. We mentioned her once when she passed away recently, and then that was really it. I mean, I guess we didn't go in, and I get it. We didn't go in on her and her career, but I think when she comes back and offers up some whack analysis, I'll be critical of it. You know what I mean? I'll be critical of it. Anyway, all right. So my guest is here. Let's take a quick break, and then let's get into this question of the wealth divide and its persistence here in the United States, black and white. Don't go anywhere. Quick break here. That makes what I like. Back in just a second.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Dedrick Asante-Muhammad joining us back again here at I Mix What I Like. What's up, sir? And you know what? I forgot all the latest. What titles are we using now for you? What is your official title this morning? Because you are a longtime analyst of racial wealth divide.
Let's just go with that. Let's just go with that, just in case my 9 to 5 doesn't approve of what I say. I can just say I wasn't representing them at the time.
And are we mentioning anything about your political career, or is that off limits in this one too?
No. We can mention my dabbling in local affairs, running for a position I think 99% of the population doesn't know exist, but nonetheless, my name is on the ballot for Howard County, 6th richest county in the country, in the highest income state in the country, Maryland, Howard County, Maryland. I'm wanting to be on the Democratic Committee, the Central Democratic Committee, with a group of people that consider themselves progressive, trying to push out the others. And it's interesting learning what people think is progressive and what does it mean to even try to engage in local politics and what would progressive reform mean. So I'm learning a lot. It's an interesting thing. And again, my campaign strategy is primarily that most people don't know about this and that most people will just vote alphabetical. And so I have Asante. So that's my path to victory. We'll see how that works.
Hey, right on. You're right. Until I saw that you were doing this, I had never thought of this position. And so you're right. Most of us, even those who claim to know anything about anything, don't know about this.
No, that's right. Like I know people who follow local politics, and they're just kind of like, because it's 20 votes you have, 10 for men, 10 for women. So it's just like two people trying to pass out, the list of everybody people should vote for. It's like no one's remembering 20 names, for this low level position. It's a very But it's interesting. I'm hoping I get it, because I think I'll get a better insight into what local politics are, particularly in a place that considers itself, because of Columbia being in it, and Columbia was founded around aspects of racial equity, economic equity, did some good community planning in the beginning, though we've seen a lot of that reversed. Be interested to see, how we discuss those issues, and if there is a chance to strengthen some of the positive things that were originally in Columbia, though, as you, a longtime resident of Columbia, know, was never a paradise.
No, it deserves its own myth busting for the history here. Something I actually wanted to do at one point, but another of the many projects I don't follow.
Yeah. No, it would be fascinating to really do analysis of Columbia with the myths. Even Aaron Magruder basing Boondocks off of a lot of what's been happening in Columbia. There's a lot to do with it. Let me know. We'd love to comment or support whatever.
Absolutely, we should do that. I should double back and enlist your support. And yeah, Magruder in a satirical way, he understood a lot about Columbia. He got a lot right about this place. But just quickly before we move on, so you said Maryland. I didn't know that. So Maryland is, you said it's the richest state. Is that what you were saying? The highest income state? Is that
it usually, I didn't look at 2022 rankings, but usually it's ranked as the highest income state. And Howard County has been ranked as much as like the third wealthiest state, I think. But now I think
county, you mean the third wealthiest county? Is that
sorry. Howard County, it was the third wealthiest county, but now I think it's the sixth wealthiest. And you find a lot of the wealthiest counties in the country all border DC.
Yeah.
It's that, so it's not so much that we have so many millionaires. We just have so many six-figure plus professionals, maybe with government jobs or jobs related to being around DC, that we get that title.
That's it. And then the other thing that I remember is that in Howard County, where recently, not too long ago, was voted or selected or whatever as the having some of the best performing public schools, they also had some of the highest segregation within the public schools between the advanced, the GT courses, and the regular courses. So within these schools, you get like all of these black and white kids go into the same building, and then they get divided.
That's right. That was, and that was the best of Howard County. Like now we've created more and more neighborhoods where there aren't even that many black people. There's definitely not that many moderate income, low income black people. I think Columbia used to, at least we all went to the same school, though we might want to go to different classes. Right.
That's right.
I remember growing up, I left a GT class. I was like, come on, I can't be the only black kid. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, at least give me a couple other kids to hang out with, right? And so I left.
My daughters report that now. They don't see other black and brown kids in their classes very often. And then and their elementary school that they both went to some years ago was, I gotta say, it was like 98% black and brown. Like there was almost no white kids in it.
Yeah.
Because and everybody had to be more or less within Columbia bussed over there, because the neighborhood surrounding the school still was predominantly white. But all their kids had either grown up, left, and the younger white people with money don't live over there anymore. So it's like older families who don't have kids that need to go to school anymore. So
and one more thing on this, and this is what we're talking about, but I do think it relates actually.
Yeah,
it's like my neighborhood. My wife called it, and I guess I consider myself more radical than my wife, but my wife I think is more pessimistic about, or maybe realistic about, race relations than myself even. And every family that comes here that has kids that is white, they all move by, if they're really liberal, they'll let their kid go to the predominantly black school for kindergarten, maybe first grade. But most of them, as soon as it's kindergarten time, they're out. Like they come here, they love it, blah, blah, blah. And at the most liberal, stay, let the kids first grade. Oh, it's a great school, but we decided we need something bigger, and it's just like, I've been here about 14 years. Everyone who's about to want to have kids, they're out of here.
When they were in elementary school, I used to go on those field trips, and I would see like the one white parent with this kid. I remember I would look at them and be like, I know this is not what you had as a plan. Like
you were trying so hard to show your analysis. You're working.
I know this bus we're on wasn't your plan. As we're riding to some whatever, this wasn't what you were anyway. So, all right. So I didn't remember this when you had reached out about this, but I had mentioned this report a little bit when it first came out. But I am definitely happy to have you here to go through it more carefully, because I think that in many ways it's fascinating and confirms a lot about what a lot of us think is wrong with this thing here, this economy so-called, or this social economic arrangement. It comes from the NBER Working Paper Series, Wealth of Two Nations, the U.S. Racial Wealth Gap, 1860 to 2020, has 4 authors you see named there. It comes out of the National Bureau of Economic Research. And as I remember mentioning when we covered it briefly a few weeks or months ago or whenever, just as they mentioned somewhere in here, it has not gone through, right, it says it's for circulation, for discussion and comment purposes. These papers have not been peer reviewed or been subject to the review by the NBER board of directors, et cetera, and so forth, which I think is important to acknowledge that, it hasn't gone through their own peer review. And it also may be saying things that they don't want to stand, they don't want to, fully, co-sign. Yeah. So I have a couple points or questions to raise, but let me let you start with anything.
I would love to hear your, you've already done some analysis. I mean, analysis or just highlights. I would love to hear where you came from, and then I can go in to a little bit of, what I'm thinking about it.
So let's see. I know I have some highlights here. The short of it is, for me, is that they show that from the moment enslavement officially ended, Black people had begun working to close the wealth divide. And I want to give you again credit for checking me and others on that use of that term. And I'll get you to come back on that, the divide versus gap, that is. And that today the white to black per capita. First of all, that's another thing I appreciated, that they did specifically white and black comparisons. They didn't incorporate the entire so-called people of color community. Not that I don't think that those communities should be considered, but I think it helps to understand this two nations argument and the specifics of the condition of Black people, I think is important. So I was glad they did that. And they show that the white to Black per capita wealth ratio is now 6-to-1. And that is as close as it has gotten since enslavement ended, when obviously the most abusive and aggressive barriers to economic advance were taken away. Relatively speaking, pockets of freedom opened up and business opportunity opened up. Black people worked to close this quote unquote gap. It got to 6-to-1 where it is today. And then my favorite part is that they said, but even if you go back and factor in and take or factor out of the equation all of the anti-Black violence and barriers and abuse and inequality, you could only hope to get the ratio down to 3-to-1. That's right.
And I think the specific point was that even if, because I don't think they actually were saying if you took all the racism out or but I think what they're saying is if Blacks even got equal returns on their investments including home ownership, because even if you are a Black homeowner, if you're in a predominantly Black neighborhood, your house has less value than a white home, white neighborhood. But they were saying even if there were, and I think she's playing around with the argument, and she's doing it in a way that, won't get her in trouble. And that's good. I don't want her to get in trouble. That's for, yourself and maybe myself to get in trouble. But she's playing around with the argument that some people try to say, well, Blacks just don't invest in the right things. And if they did invest in the right things, then they would close the racial wealth divide. And she's highlighting that even if Blacks had equal returns to whites, which they don't, but if they did, we would still have a 3-to-1 divide in terms of racial wealth inequality. And I do think that's an interesting and helpful argument.
All right. So I got to go back and because I thought at one point,
a little bit.
Well, no, but I thought at one point she actually, and the she we're talking about is Elora Derranacourt,
Yes.
is the lead author here.
Yes.
Derranacourt.
I have a hard time pronouncing her last name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope.
Elora,
Forgive me,
yeah.
Elora. But I thought at one point that they do write in here something to the effect that if we took away the redlining and the racism and all of that, it still would be 3-1. But I'll double check that. But let me at least just share this part here with our audience. In 2019, Black Americans held just 17 cents on average for every white dollar of wealth. By comparison, the income gap is 50 cents to the dollar. What's more, the racial wealth gap has shown remarkable stability over the last several decades with little indication of further convergence. Although there is, I love how academics write when they write this way.
Yeah.
Like the horrible thing of the racial wealth has remarkable stability.
Yeah.
like the persistence of abuse is remarkably stable. Anyway, although there is a large literature on the contemporary racial wealth gap, much less is known about the evolution of the wealth gap over the full post-emancipation period. We introduced the first continuous time series of white to black per capita wealth ratios in the US over the past 160 years. Our data show that the most dramatic episode of racial wealth convergence occurred in the first 50 years after emancipation. This initially rapid convergence gave way to much slower declines in the wealth gap in the second half of the 20th century. From a starting point of nearly 60-1, the white to black per capita wealth ratio fell to 10-1 by 1920 and 7-1 by the 1950s. 70 years later, the wealth gap remains at a similar magnitude of 6-1. We demonstrate that both this hockey stick pattern of convergence and large enduring gap today can be broadly rationalized by a parsimonious model of wealth accumulation for each racial group, where savings from income and capital gains are the drivers of wealth growth. Even under equal conditions for wealth accumulation after slavery, in other words, identical savings rates, capital gains across the two groups, our convergence model portends a racial wealth gap of 3-1 today. The main reason for such a large and lasting gap is the enormous difference in initial wealth between black and white Americans on the eve of Civil War. So, my memory notwithstanding, the point still remains, if I'm reading this correctly, it doesn't matter what you do now, the original inequality can't be made up for in the current arrangement.
Without specific intervention to
there you go. Okay, right on.
That's I believe the paper's point, and it's a fairly radical point for an academic paper that actually it's not going to close by itself, which is something us in the racial wealth divide field have been saying for as long as we've been around, and she's even pointing to and she's leaning to that. She doesn't say this. Well, she kind of says this outright, that we actually have to have redistribution focused on blacks if we want this to close at any, in any 20-year or 40-year period. That's where she hints at. She won't say it that clearly. I've been playing around with the op-ed so I can make that point more clearly, but I think that is what the paper is guiding us to. And that's, interesting and fairly radical thing for an academic paper to put forward. And I think I also note, this 60-1 wealth divide she has, and I say she, it's it's
6-1, not 6. You said 6-1, right? Not
60.
Okay,
60
I'm sorry.
to 1, right at slavery. She said it was right at slavery, and there's a big decrease to 10-1 by 1920. But I've reached out to her. She's kind of blowing me off, but I'm like, fine, you can blow me off, but you have a research assistant or someone I can talk to, because I want to get the actual, what is the dollar amount? And actually, I think I found some of that. What is the dollar amount that blacks actually had right out of slavery? Because you can radically decrease 60-1 to 10-1 if you had $0 and then you go to 10. That will radically decrease this idea of of 60-1 to 10-1 in a huge fashion. So when blacks were actual property and couldn't own property in the mass, and then they could actually get paid, have a job, yes, that would greatly decrease that ratio, but it might not. It probably doesn't as radically decrease the dollar divide. The actual total amount between blacks and whites, and so I think those are things I want to pull apart a little bit more, because it's kind of like today where you see that there is blacks of higher income, the ratio to white wealth, it might not be, depending how you use the data, 7-to-1. It might be only 2-to-1, right? So it's bridged a lot, but the dollar amount might be more, right? Because the high income blacks compared to high income whites, their median wealth might be $1 million, and blacks might be 500,000. They have a $500,000 gap. When you're comparing white middle class to black middle class, you might just be comparing 200,000 to 20,000, and so it's $180,000 gap. So it's just it might be a little overly complicated, but I do think it's important, because I think you can use the ratio or you can use the dollar amounts, and sometimes the dollar amounts might tell you more about the breadth of inequality versus just the ratio. So those are things that I do want to get a better understanding of.
No, I appreciate that, and I would love it if folks would do both.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, because they both tell
helpful.
you something important,
Yeah.
and you want both. You're absolutely right.
Just quickly, the link to this article is already in the show description, so you can check it out on your own, and encourage you to do so. O.L. Griffin, you owe me an apology, because on the first time I talked about this report, I did bring up the fact that it mentions, it shouts out Dr. Sandy Darity, so it wasn't my attempt to be petty and leave him out. It was just that I've already mentioned this, and it's something that I think we would have come back to, because, as we've already mentioned, part of the goal for pro-reparationists, if I could say it that way, for reparation supporters, is to show, just as we've already shown here, that the racial wealth gap or divide cannot be closed without an aggressive intervention. So whether that's the Darity style reparations plan, which I ultimately don't think it wouldn't certainly guarantee a close in the wealth gap or divide. From what I remember of his plan, I mean, it wouldn't guarantee it, but I certainly understand that. Anyway, it wasn't my attempt to, but I understand that people who want reparations, myself included, would want to point out that, as this report does, there needs to be some sort of actual intervention. Because, in other words, just telling people to start businesses and save and do all that kind of stuff and quote unquote financial literacy their way to equality, that's not going to do it.
Can I jump into the reparations piece?
Just real quick, let me just get this one more, and then you can. I just want to respond to a couple of these real quick. Are more articles nowadays out with peer review, or has peer review always just been a percentage of work in any institute? Thank you, Quaker Anarchist, not only for the question, but you're being loud in these social media streets on BPM's behalf. Peer review, I don't know, honestly, if peer review is getting more, if there are more peer-reviewed papers being called for reparations, or by institutes like NBER or entities like NBER. I think in general, so I don't know, but in general, I think peer review is important, and always adds another level of the quality of the analysis, just because it does that. It's, a blind peer review process encourages people who are your peers to review the work and assess its quality, its value. Is it adding to the literature? Is it doing, what it's, claiming to be appropriately? And I think it's helpful. So, but I don't know. I just wanted to point out that NBER is itself saying this has not gone through its own peer review process, and is just being put out for discussion and consideration. So,
and what I find interesting about the peer review part is that, like, I don't even know of a racial wealth divide paper, racial wealth gap paper that's peer reviewed. Like I don't even even that she brought that up. I'm like, that's because I think, because she's at print, because I think it's only recently that racial wealth gaps even being considered serious, right? And you have people from Princeton writing it, but like the papers I've written, I mean, and they're more for the people, aren't peer reviewed. Most of the stuff I've seen Sandy and Derek do, I'm sure they must have done some peer reviewed paper at some point because they're professors. But the stuff I've seen them do on racial wealth divide, that stuff wasn't, aimed at academics to be peer reviewed. So that's
you know what? That's interesting. Now that I think about it, I'm thinking, I'm trying to think. A lot of the academic papers that I've read that would have been peer reviewed that reference this work often reference work that itself may not have been peer reviewed. So in other words, yeah, it may have referenced yours or Hamilton's or Darity's or anyone else's that in that particular piece may not have gone through a peer review. It may have, I don't know. What? I don't know. You got to ask these folks. Yeah.
Yeah, because oftentimes we were writing not through colleges, but we were writing through some nonprofit or something like that. Again, it's only, I think, starting to be considered real academic worthy study recently. I mean, there's been academics who've been doing it for a long time, Sandy, Derek, Thomas Shapiro, what have you, but again, their stuff has been written much more for public through foundations.
That's
like
interesting.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, some people say was the big guy that helped restart the racial wealth divide thing, and that clearly that was an Atlantic piece. So
the reparations, that wasn't going to get period. That would have been, you know what? And I was even thinking, I've even published one or two peer-reviewed pieces that reference like yours or Darity or Hamilton's work. And my article was peer-reviewed, but it wasn't. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that everything that I researched was peer-reviewed.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Anyway, that's an interesting question. So anyway, but you wanted to say something about the reparations piece, real quick.
Oh yeah, my take, for whatever it's worth, is that I think, if you want to understand of Darity's proposal for racial wealth to bridge racial wealth divide through reparations, I think it would substantially bridge racial wealth inequality. The question is, for how long? Like, that's if it was implemented, right? Like my approach is that you do need targeted Black reparations, but you also need a progressive economy in order to help maintain whatever equity is gained and not just lose it all, right? And to probably reinforce it. So, like, I think it's both. It's not just one intervention.
Sure.
Leaving the structure of the economy the same, but I also think you change the structures of the economy. I haven't seen even massive redistribution. I haven't seen them being able to bridge racial wealth inequality. I even look at Cuba, where they did massive redistribution, and you still have this strong, socioeconomic inequality, right? So,
no, that's what I'm saying. I don't remember the details, but when I read Darity's, what's the name of that book?
Yes, his big book
on
equality. Yeah, From Here to Equality.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What I remember in it was, what I definitely remember were the call for the cash payouts of, I want to say, what is it, like 300 some thousand per. I forgot the total, but I don't. So in focusing on that in and of itself, I don't think would close the racial wealth gap, because getting a big payout doesn't necessarily grant you access to wealth. It then just depends on what you do with it. Right. And then it depends on what you have access to in terms of investment. It depends on, and then if the ownership of the economy doesn't change, it's not going to close the divide. It's going to maybe, they want to claim, rise all boats, but the gap isn't going to close. The divide wouldn't close. I don't see how that.
I would think so. If Blacks are getting, if every Black person is getting $300,000, the median wealth for Blacks is $9,000. I think generally median wealth is going to go up, right? Like, I just think, like, you pay some bills, some people pay off their homes, some people buy a home. You buy a home, you radically increase. It might go,
you're right. That's
it might go from 9,000 to 50,000, right. And white still might be at 160,000 median wealth. But I think it would, we have so little wealth, that type of payment.
But they're the ones receiving all those payments. It's the white community the white community is the one receiving all the mortgage payoffs and all the debt payments. So, like, wouldn't their collective wealth go up as well? Like, if I pay off my house, I mean, I'm debt free, but the person I owed just got that payment, right?
The good thing for us in terms of median wealth is that the whites who would most benefit from that would be so much in the 1%, it wouldn't affect much the median wealth. So we would catch up a bit in median wealth, comparing median to median.
All right, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
come on back.
I think the important thing about her paper as it will work to peer review is I do think it's, helpful to have this long-term analysis of 1860 to 2020. I think too, as you dive into it, it might, really raise questions about, as people put forward, this is what we need to do to bridge inequality. Like we needed the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, right? Or voting rights, or, under Obama. And you can see how little to no effect those, and Obama not so much, but, changes in the 50s and 60s were momentous in many ways, right? But it did little to change economic inequality, racial wealth inequality, and that's something that isn't highlighted enough. And I think, and I don't think the authors of this paper want to focus in on that, but I think for others to look at and really tear that apart. I mean, I think even interestingly enough, how little impact the semi-redistributionist New Deal policies of the 40s and 50s did little for Black Americans. I mean, that's kind of known. Sometimes it's not known. And you could argue, well, that's just also because there was so much more outright discrimination and racial segregation that if we did something like that today, it would have a more equitable impact, and you can play around with that. But I do think it is, helpful to understand. And I've always used racial wealth divide to help note, usually over the last 20 years, that there's been so little, actually, then in many ways it's getting worse, as her paper highlights. Since 1980, the racial wealth divide is actually growing, that we're not on a path to racial equality. And I think her paper helps extend the argument that it's not just from the Reagan era. It is arguably not much has changed since 1920. And that's, pretty mind-blowing, I think, for many people.
Just quick, I'm trying to catch a little bit of what's in the chat. Be nice to each other, everybody. We don't need to be beefing with each other, and be nicer to me too. How about that? Some of y'all are pretty mean in the chat. No, that's it.
I don't think I see the chat.
You might. I think you can't.
Okay.
From here, you would have to pull it up on a separate YouTube thing. I forgot that's how it works here. Just quickly, you would have to. What happened to Diallo on Friday's show? You would have to ask him. It's his schedule. I mean, I didn't do anything to him. If that's the implication. No, I'm just playing. Without business ownership, how will we sustain the wealth? And that again, Dedrick, is part of my question. And that report you all let me contribute to last year or whenever it still provides one of my favorite stats that it's not enough to have Black-owned businesses if, as we all showed in that report, from 92 to 2012, more than 2 million Black businesses were developed, and the capture of the national sales revenue went down to 0.03%. So it's not, again, it can't just be about starting businesses as a way to close this divide. It has to be something beyond that as well.
That's right. And I think, I think you will take it to a, more radical end, but even in a kind of moderate end, you have to have sustainable, you have to have it scalable if you're really trying to build up Black business. And how is that done? And when they talk about entrepreneurship, that's not what they're talking about. It's like, as the paper showed, there's been a great increase in Black ownership, in Black business ownership, but the total revenue has gone down. And I think, I think in our society where big business runs so much, this whole idea of 40s, 50s, open up a mom and pop and being able to really, develop wealth to pass on to the next generation. That's a much more unlikely model nowadays. And mom and pop stores didn't have to compete against. It used to be Walmart, now it's Amazon. Like, how does anybody compete against Amazon? There
is none. And yeah, Griffin, I haven't seen your apology in the chat. You got me wrong before there. You might have me wrong here too, saying I just skimmed Darity's book, but I may not have read it closely enough. But please be specific and let me know what I've missed. I mean, I hope the intent isn't just to come here and talk trash in the chat. Put in the work. and let me know what I got wrong. I mean, it's and let me know what in his analysis am I missing that, but anyway. Can reparations truly be decided without political power? Does political power come before the acquisition, or does trying to acquire before part of the process? My argument is that we only have political power and should not be and should only be trying to build that and not be trying to, because again, look, I even just, the book that that O.L. Griffin says I haven't read clearly enough. I just happened to see, and he's probably right, or she, I'm not sure. Griffin is probably right, that I haven't read it closely enough, but I will share what part, just quickly, something that I did happen to see that I did read that is relevant to Ricky's question. Darity argues here the invoice reparation must go to the nation's government. So, and my point in bringing that up is that this is my point about political power, that even if you want Darity's plan for reparations, it requires political organization and movement that assumes what Olufemi Taiwo and others have been writing about for a long time now, the capture of the political apparatus that is currently held by the elite. Well, if you have political power, you can determine where the wealth of the society goes and how it's constructed and who gets it. So that's my only argument. So even for Darity's plan for the national government to be involved, the federal government to be involved in payouts and whatever else is going to help, that's what I'm saying is necessary. And my only disagreement on that level, sorry, my only disagreement with Darity and folks on that level is if the only appeal you make is to the Democratic and Republican parties as they're currently constructed with a currently constructed political approach, is not going to work. So that's anyway. But go ahead, Dedrick. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I don't think Darity's book focuses so much on what is the specific solution for reparations. I mean, it lists a whole bunch of different types of ideas of reparations or what have you. But I do think, I think he's focused on federal government because he is trying to critique the idea that we're having meaningful reparations county by county or city by city. These places are saying we're going to have reparations. And they might say, we'll name a park after a Black person. They call that reparations. So I do think he's trying to critique that actually it would. I think the importance of his book, he's trying to highlight the material resources necessary require a massive federal payout. Now, how you get there, which is I think is what you're talking about, is you do it through Democrats, Republicans. You have to create, a different political system, what have you. That's a different thing. But I think the importance of his argument is, yes, the resources required. And I think that's the basic thing of the racial wealth divide. And people get frustrated that we highlight the depth of the problem. But it's also quite clear, though no one really wants to say it, there's no will to put forth the resources to bridge racial wealth inequality, to have affordable housing for all, or to include Blacks or live in, even just in a nice suburb, third nicest place in the country, according to some different magazines. White people still move out when their kids get 7 or 8. They literally
created River Hill as an addition to Columbia, so they could get away from the low income housing.
Yes.
They don't even say apartments anymore. It's multifamily housing. Yes. Now is the language. They don't even they don't even want to say the language. I don't want to live near the people in apartments. So they say I don't want to live near people in multifamily housing. Yeah. Because when I first saw that, it's some Howard County Zoom thing I went to last year, I was like, what the hell is that phrase? You keep saying multifamily housing. What is that? Yeah. And I had to literally ask the question. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. They were like, oh, we mean that. Oh, those are apartments. I was like, well, damn, we're even elongating the phrase to get away from to come up with another euphemism for saying, I don't want to be around poor people. I don't want to be around Black people. So we're going to create a river. Like Columbia is too much. That's
right.
We even got to create exclusivity here. So, I mean, it's anyway. There was, let me pull that. I wanted to come back to that paper
And,
real quick.
and,
It was one other
and you
thing.
were talking
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
political power before, and I know
Mhm.
this was forever ago. Do you want to critique me at all for that piece I did about Black and economic power and Stokely Carmichael or what have you? And this is like 4 months ago, I
Oh
think.
yeah, I forgot. No. I know Netfa had a criticism, and I think I agreed with him, but I don't remember the specifics. I
Okay.
honestly don't remember the specifics of what it had something to do with the reference to Kwame Ture, something about but I honestly I can't
Yeah.
remember
I mean,
exactly
I'm
what.
assuming the
Yeah.
basic critique is using Black radical Kwame Ture and at best a liberal reformist article. And, I plead guilty. I mean, it was
Maybe
that, but
yeah.
I'd rather throw out Kwame Ture and hopefully inspire a few people to look up this guy. And actually, I think it's interesting. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael's 60s analysis, right? Is still a kind of a radical critique of the liberal analysis of how they address racial
Yeah.
inequality. So like I'm trying to pull it out more and more. And I know it's not the Pan-African socialism, of the All African People's Revolutionary
No,
Party, but I'm just like, that's too much for the circles I'm dealing with.
even his 60s Democratic
Yes.
Party engagement was left of Bernie Sanders and all
Yeah,
of that.
that's right.
I think so like it but I don't remember specifically
Okay.
what was it. But similarly, how do we, this question, this is the sort of the chicken and the egg question. How do we build political power without having any money to fund political activities, day-to-day tasks? It takes money to run a campaign. Again, when I'm saying political power, I'm reusing the phrase political power in what I think is its true meaning. The struggle for control over the mechanisms of society. So I'm not talking about a political campaign or a political party per se. I'm saying, and again, I'm intentionally vague here because I think these are answers that don't come on YouTube shows. But when I say assume political power, I'm saying whatever has to occur so that the decisions of the society are made with the input, if not by the people themselves. So in other words, again, I don't think you need money to amass large groups of people to take positions advocating for a certain policy or a certain goal. I think it's the encouraged myth that poor people should chase an ever elusive pot of gold before they can become politically threatening. That is what inhibits us. So I'm not saying think about funding a political campaign and getting ads on TV and buses and pins. I'm thinking of what do groups of people need to do to organize themselves to make their political will unavoidable. Again, Dr. King at the end of his life, and I'll stop here, Dedrick, was advocating becoming an interruptive force that blocked the day-to-day operation of the society. He was not advocating that people start businesses and get their money right and do this and do that before they become a threat. And I don't think you need a lot of money to become an organized threat. I think quite the opposite. What you need is just will and some reach and some commitment among those who claim to know better. So, but
yeah, and I'll just jump into this a little bit in that, when I started doing racial wealth divides work in 2003, 2004, my interest in that was to highlight that there really is no avenue toward equality in our current society. I think, and my papers are used in more liberal reformist things. So I think people get frustrated because they're like, well, I don't understand how we're going to get the Democrats and Manchin to vote for your racial wealth divide thing. Well, I don't think they will. I'm just highlighting that it is not some easy thing that's going to be done. It's going to require $10 trillion of redistribution and then structuring the economy to maintain that redistribution. And so really the radical conclusion from that is that we're not going to be able to live like white people. We're not going to in this society. We are going to have to do something different. And it's going to require organizing, bring together resources. Our goals can't be, because, on a more radical piece, like white people in America live the way they do because of concentrated wealth globally, because of what they've done. Like, we can't take that amount of resources, anymore. Like, we don't have a new group to enslave, right, and build up our wealth that we can have. So, like, we're gonna have to look at, really what is sustainable living, and how can we be peace with that, and then the challenge in terms of like empire and and capitalists never having enough is how can you defend whatever little thing you can build so that the outside forces don't come and ravage that, even though it's nothing in terms of concentrated wealth as compared to them, right? So that's the radical pieces that could be taken from my work, instead of just this idea that, oh, well, Dedrick's saying that, we have to get Biden to redistribute $10 trillion. Like, I get it. That's not going to happen. I get it. Like, this electorate, it's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen in 20 years. Not going to happen in 40 years. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing organizing. I think you can do political organizing. Even Stokely Carmichael, when he was doing Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, it wasn't because he thought it would bring freedom. He thought it was a great organizing tool to raise awareness, consciousness,
That's right,
create a base that would, keep going. So anyway.
Thank you, Kenyatta. Appreciate your support of the channel. Appreciate you. And thank you for listening and joining the conversation.
Can I mention one other report before you kick me off?
I'm not kicking you off. I'm going to come back to this report for a quick second before we wrap up. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, so I just want you to know, I want to go to one more report by the same author, who I think it's interesting just to note, and people can look at later. But we can finish with this one, with this report first.
Well, I just wanted to come back to this, a little bit of what is said here at the end, because as they write here, given existing differences in the wealth accumulating conditions for white and Black individuals, our analysis suggests that full wealth convergence is still an extremely distant or even unattainable scenario. So I appreciate that they said this in something like a report like this. Furthermore, rising asset prices have become an important driver of racial wealth inequality in recent decades. The average white household holds a significant share of their wealth in equity and has therefore benefited from booming stock prices, while the average Black household, for whom housing continues to be the most important asset, has been largely left out of these gains. So, and again, I want to say again, that since most of Black wealth is in housing, the predictions of the people like Michael Burry, who predicted the 2008 crash, are saying something's coming even worse. So we're looking at, if they're correct, something even worse happening in wiping out what exists in Black wealth. But to the point that they're making there, and to the point you even were just making, Dedrick, the way white people have accumulated their wealth and the way they maintain it today are through mechanisms that are not offered or possible for Black or any other community. We cannot go through the enslavement, the genocide, that primitive wealth accumulation that they went through. And they did not get their amassed wealth through starting small businesses and saving their money and being financially literate. That's not what they did. That's right. And they don't maintain it today on some equal playing grid. They're like it just said there, they have access to all these other kinds of asset increasing avenues, et cetera, or asset.
And people misread whites have more of their money in equity, Blacks have more in home ownership. So Blacks just need to have more of their money in equity. But the reason Blacks have, only 43% of Black own homes, 73% of whites own homes. And my researcher says Black-white home ownership divide's been the same for 100 years, right? So, okay. So we don't even have that much wealth, even when we have homes. But the overall point is, Blacks can't just move. Well, I'm not going to pay my mortgage. I'm instead going to buy stocks. You can't do that, right? Because you got to live somewhere. So of course you're going to spend more of your money, and it's better to spend it in a home than on an apartment where you get, because people say, oh, you don't get much returns on home. That's true. You might get 1%, right? But 1% is better than no percent, which is what you do when you rent, and you have to pay to live somewhere. So it's not as simple, oh, well, Blacks just need to put more money in stocks. Nah, they don't have money. That's why it's not in stocks, and they're not even majority homeowners. So I just want to clarify that, because people go left with that, or maybe they go right, actually, with that type of analysis.
Before you get to that report, I just want to bring this up from my own work, what the stuff I was looking at. In terms of financial wealth, in 2013, the top 1% of households had 49.8% of all privately held stock, 54%, 0.7% of financial securities, and 62.8% of business equity. So in other words,
Yeah.
the top 10% had 84 to 94% of stocks, bonds, trust funds, and business equity, and almost 80% of non-home real estate. So in other words, even if you did want to say, I'm not going to pay my mortgage this month and I'm going to buy some stock, there's no stock to buy. You're not catching up. It's already owned, or you have to rely on one of those top 10 or 1% to sell you what they have. So in other words, it's not, it's, again, I'm just saying that there's not some pot of wealth sitting there saying, hey, why aren't black people coming to get me? Why are they so ignorant?
And you and I have talked about this. You need a lot of stock to make a lot of money. You know what I mean?
But-
Like I play around with stocks. Like I've said this before. I put money in Tesla pretty early. I did really good, but I was only putting 1,000, 2,000 in. You know what I mean? That's a lot of money to a lot of people. But you know, this 1% putting in 50,000, 100,000 in the beginning, right? So when they get 100% return, now we're talking $1 million versus like, I'm happy. Woo, I got 10,000. Yeah, that's great, but that's not like
for you. But even if you did better and it did radically change your life,
yes,
that doesn't mean anything for the rest of the black community. So that's even as you're saying that,
and two, I'm able to have 1,000 to do this because I'm in the top 5% of income earners for Black Americans, right? It's not like because no financial planner would recommend that you take your rent money and put it in a stock that you hope will get a return in 10 years. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, anyway.
Look, like I said the other day, we right here are at Black Power Media on YouTube are in the top 10% of all YouTube channels just by being monetized at all. So, and we have, so think about what that means. And we have 18.2 thousand subscribers. Thank you, everybody. And as nice as that is, that's relatively low compared to some of these immense channels that even within the 10% that are monetized are making a lion's share of all the money on YouTube. So it's just, you know, being in that exclusive 10% group doesn't even mean necessarily that you're doing well. So you, Dedrick, being in that top whatever percent group that has even enough to invest in the Tesla as the level you did, doesn't mean that you're comparable to the white folks in that group. And it also doesn't mean it's helping the collective of Black people.
That's right.
Which is ultimately the point. Yeah.
I don't have that much. And I'm really, you know, we'll see if I significantly help my children, hopefully so, but not so much family and friends, much less help a whole community. You know what I mean? Like it takes a lot of wealth to hit a lot of people who are all in asset poverty. That's always the challenge of, you know, like the Black success. And you see people laugh at, you know, Black millionaires when they're sports or entertainment, and then they go broke. Well, you know, like Muhammad Ali, he paid a lot of people's rents. Like, and I don't critique him for that, right? But it's just like when you have so many people in need and you have a heart, it's hard to like, well, I'll just keep it and I'm going to keep making. So I'm going to go for 10 million. I'm going to go for 50 million while you know people who are being put out of the house, right? So it's just
now, everybody liked to talk trash about MC Hammer, and he was a punchline for a long time. But that was more than anything else the reason why he went broke. It wasn't that he was just ignorant with his money. He was actually trying to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then to your point, you realize, I mean, you know, even just in our own family, you realize how hard it can be to maintain and keep all four people at a certain experiential level. I mean, it's like one kid might do better than another kid. Somebody not going at Disney. You know, it's like I mean, it's crazy. Look. Anyway, go ahead and you said there was another report you wanted to bring up.
I'll just mention and people can look it up. And there's even a YouTube 7-minute overview, which I find interesting. Can you move to opportunity? Evidence from the Great Migration. And and this is just by Darren Court, or however you pronounce her name. And it's, you know, it's an interesting look at Black migration, Blacks from the South to, you know, Midwest, the North, and the 30s, 40s, or whatever that time period was. And, you know, the common refrain is Blacks moved to do economically better, and they kind of stopped the story there. Like, yay, right? They did better. Even though we know the places they moved, like Baltimore and Detroit, are places that have some of the highest Black poverty, mass violence, mass incarceration. And she does an economic look and notes that, yes, it is true that Blacks, when they moved, I'm a little unclear sometimes because she goes back and forth between blacks and just people who migrated as a whole. So I'm a little confused by that. But some migrants generally did make twice as much as they did from the South when they moved from the South to the North. But she says 3 generations on, you see that actually that blacks in the South have the same economic mobility levels, if not better, than blacks in the North, like in Detroit and Baltimore, you know. And I think that, you know, and she leans toward this idea of that, you know, moving to opportunity isn't enough because, and she doesn't say this clearly, but because of the reaction, the white race's reaction to what happens to blacks when they move and how the whole economy changes. And then there aren't public investments in the schools anymore. There is massive police presence. And she does say this, massive police presence and mass incarceration, which then makes high economic opportunity areas into opportunity deserts when we get there, right? And so, you know, she uses the good academic language. It makes it hard enough for people to understand that, you know, she won't get too blasted. But I think it's good for us to look at these reports and help highlight, you know, the realities of what she's saying. Is that just because it's always, well, black people just need to move to this area. We just keep moving, you know, we'll finally hit the promised land, even though I don't think there's any group that's moved internally as much as African Americans, right? So, you know, and I think too, it also explains why so many African Americans started moving back south, right? Yeah. You know, over the last 20 years. It's like, you know, we moved up here for jobs 60 years ago. There's not many jobs in the South either, but at least it's more affordable. So let me go down to the South. And actually, that's where you see some of the highest levels of black home ownership is in the South and in these more affordable areas, which makes sense. So anyway, I just think it's an interesting thing that people should look at. I haven't heard anyone else really cite that report.
No, I definitely want to look it up. I appreciate that. And when I find it, I'll put it in the show description below as well. Look, the same thing happened here. I mean, I keep using my little neighborhood as a microcosm, but even here in Columbia, you know, people gentrify out of Baltimore and DC, get put out here into the lower income section of Columbia. And then just a couple of years ago, again, my original neighborhood was deemed a blighted community. They take out the grocery store, all this, the pharmacy's gone, the bank is gone. They put in a police substation. They hire private security for the immediate neighborhood. I mean, it's the same. It's like, damn. And then they turn around and they're like, see, that's why white folks have to create River Hill, because they can't be that close to the riffraff.
And I've always taken the lesson from Columbia, I think a progressive lesson, is that you need tight. Columbia did it in an interesting way, and they didn't do it through government. They did it through kind of one developer controlling everything. But you could, which was like the Rouse Company at that time period, you could really only make things somewhat more equitable with this power that oversaw everything. So it was going to be one grocery store here, so everybody could go. Once developers started creating Wegmans and you start creating strip mall Targets that have grocery stores, where now, you know, the money that the giant was making is being divided up. They can't afford it. And part of the planning was we wanted people in apartments to have a grocery store and a place they could work, right? That they could walk to and not have to get a car, right? Like, that was the whole point. You need a overriding force that's developing for equity, because private market will tear that apart all the time unless you have a more powerful force to keep that in line. So I think that is like,
and the reverse, the conservative end of that is, as old boy wrote in the bell curve, was we can keep all of them if we put everything where they need it, then we keep all of them there and they don't come to where we are. So it was like the idea, because like when I was a kid, I could literally walk across the street to a grocery store. I could go to, obviously the liquor store is still there, of course, the gas station, the bank, the pharmacy, the pizza place, the Chinese carryout, the laundromat, there was cleaners.
But with that originally too, though, there was one grocery store. So the rich people had to go there too, right? And if the rich people were going to that grocery store, it had to be at a certain level. It's when you start allowing, now we're going to have a rich person's grocery store. Oh, that changes everything.
That's right.
And so you have to have that force. No, rich people, you're going here too. You're going to the same
you're right.
school.
That's right. I forgot about that. Right.
Yeah.
because I could walk there, but the white folks and the people with more money surrounding that could drive there also shop there. Right.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right. That's right. But it also was like, I'm thinking it also made it harder for us to go to the mall or the lake. Like we weren't encouraged to go outside of that neighborhood. So it was like, that's what I'm saying, like the bell curve thing of keep them all in their colonies.
Right. And I do think that was a critique.
Yeah, that's wow.
I do think there was a critique of Columbia too, is they never built, the one thing was missing, a strong public transportation system.
No, they didn't.
There was never.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that they knew, like they don't want, they like, we made it so poor people don't have to have a car. And the flip side is we made it, we don't want them to have a car to go anywhere else either. Like the same thing, like in DC, like the Metro line doesn't take you to Georgetown. Like they don't want you.
No, and that's right, because the Metro line in DC was never about the people of DC getting places. It was about getting to their job.
In and out.
Getting out. It was never, the bus system was meant for the people of DC, not the train.
That's it. Yeah, that's right.
All
right, my man. Listen, anytime, you're always welcome here. Appreciate you coming through and helping us out. And good luck with your campaign. And
yes, sir. Yeah. If you're in Howard County, Dedrick Asante-Muhammad, second person on the vote. Put me in and let me bath in reformism and liberalism.
We have to think about that. So if we ever have an Asante Ball campaign team, we might be able to do something with that alphabetical order thing.
Yeah.
We might have
all we need is like a C. I mean a Castro. We could be ABC, the ABC group or something. Yeah.
A Castro or a Che. That's it. I hear you.
That's right.
All right, my man. Thanks again, Dedrick. Appreciate you for coming through, man. Take care. Sir. All right, everybody. Much appreciation to Dedrick Muhammad. Thanks to all of you and the remixers, all the chats who are here live, to those who will see and hear this later. Appreciate you as well. Definitely hope that we helped understand, help clarify some things around. And we called out some folks who
is wrong, bro.
Or who are.
He's full of shit.
And we brought you your
message.
So, hey, listen. I know we gotta go, and I know at the end of the show, most of you feel like
no, God, no, God, please, no.
But we do have to end. I'm sorry, we gotta go. Got other things to do. You have other shows to watch, other platforms to visit. This one else, just to continue to support. So definitely make sure you like, share, subscribe, join the channel if you can. Got other things, put it in the comments, and we'll do another comment and criticism segment in future shows, maybe even this Friday when we come back and I mix what I like. Of course, we're back with the Remix Morning Show tomorrow, so don't miss that, and throughout the week. And as always, as Fred Hampton used to say, to you we say peace, as long as you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.